Hey everybody, Insane Mike here, host of Attack of the Killer Podcast. Time for another video for you, the Patreon donator. This is part 2 in my series of my 100 favorite movies of all time. Give you more of an insight of my tastes and my likings. And I know you're saying, Mike, you talk about movies on Attack of the Killer Podcast. Why are you doing videos on this stuff too? Do something new, do something different. Not all of these movies are horror films, so just so you know, my tastes expand even beyond horror. I'm also a big fan of comedies, but you'll see quite a diverse batch of films within my top 100. Now, there's no order to this, and I'm just talking about these movies at random. So it's not like this movie is better than this movie on my list. It would be impossible for me to do that, and it may even change after this series is done. I may have forgotten a movie or two that I'm like, oh yeah, that one should have been on the list as well. Or I'll see something new and I'm like, oh my god, I love this movie. It's my favorite now. So, on the last video, in part 1, I talked about The Deadly Spawn as being one of my favorite films of all time. And it is. But at the time, I didn't have handy my big box of the movie that I first rented, and when I first saw this movie and fell in love with it. And actually, this is the exact version from the video store that I rented it from, under the title of Return of the Aliens Deadly Spawn. I've talked about this big box on the show numerous times, and now it's time for you guys to see it if you've never seen it before. Unlike the DVD version, where it's just an artist rendering of the creature, you see the actual creature in all its glory right there on the front. Put out by Continental Video. They were a label that did a ton of these big boxes and did a lot of more like obscure gore films and stuff. This movie, it just drips red, man. Look at that. There's like body parts on there, and just everything looks like wet and red. It's just awesome. So much so that you even got the creature's reflection on the very bottom of the box. Survival of the fittest, man versus the ultimate eating machine. Even on the back of the box has gotten a little beat up over the years, which sucks. But on the back of the box, you got even more great gore shots from the film right there. This tape is one of my prized possessions of my movie collection. Not just because like how awesome this is, but it again, like I said, this is literally the version. When the video store started selling their older tapes, I grabbed this one right away because it's from the exact video store. This is the copy that I rented and saw for the very first time. Moving on, we got a ton of movies to talk about, and we don't want to just talk about the same movies we talked about in the last episode. First one I'm going to talk about next here is from 1997. Again, I'm a big fan of comedy. I'm actually a pretty big Kevin Smith fan. And I'm actually kind of surprised at how many, honestly, I'm kind of surprised at how many Kevin Smith films still end up in my top 100. You're going to see a few of them. And I thought for sure over time, they would kind of trail off, because, a lot of them have kind of gone further down the list, as you could say. They're just not as impactful as they were when they first came out, when I first saw them. But I still love them. I still like Kevin Smith as a filmmaker. I still really like his writing. But this one's from 1997. This is probably one of his more personal films. And that's Chasing Amy. And that's why I really love this one. It feels like it's a far more personal film. It's far more lower budget than some of his other films. And where, like, you're not going to find Clerks in the top 100. That one has slipped off for me over the years. I still like that movie, but it's not in the top 100 anymore. And what that movie I found pioneering back in the day is kind of doesn't have the same impact anymore. But Chasing Amy for me still does. And so this was to me a great follow-up to Clerks, and the fact that it's really low budget, and it wears its budget on its sleeve. The writing is great, and it's really funny, and ton of pop culture references till the end of time. So Chasing Amy's on there. Next one I want to talk about is probably my all-time favorite musical. That's right, a musical shows up on here. And honestly, so like I talk about, I'm a fan of Kevin Smith. On the last video I've talked about, and if anybody ever listens to the show knows, I'm a huge George Romero fan. And like I mentioned with these videos, these videos are going to be a lot of movies that have inspired me, movies I've watched over and over again, movies from some of my all-time favorite filmmakers. And another one of my all-time favorite filmmakers is Brian De Palma. And sadly, only one of Brian De Palma's movies ended up in the top 100. I know, I'm just as shocked as you are. And it's probably not even the one you would expect. No, it's not Carrie. It's not Blowout, which, God, I love that movie. It's not even Scarface. Scarface is not even close. It's from 1974, Phantom of the Paradise. That's right. This movie is awesome. I love the music in this movie. I don't know why the music in this movie really, I really gravitate towards. I guess I never knew I was a Paul Williams fan. I even watched that. There was a Paul Williams documentary. I can't remember the name of it. It came out a few years ago, and I watched it online, and I was just captivated. Like, they barely talked about Phantom of the Paradise in the documentary, but I was just like, oh, give me more Paul Williams. So, man, and I don't have any Paul Williams music. I don't have like any Paul Williams albums or CDs or even any of his stuff like downloaded or anything. And I've been wanting to, because I just love the music in this so much. And his vocal styles, I really gravitate. It's really kind of nasally, and there's, I don't know, something about it that really attracts me to it. But I know, weird, right? Like, a guy like me into Paul Williams music. And Paul Williams is in this movie, and it's just off the wall bonkers. It's such a whole separate universe from the reality we know, and De Palma did an amazing job kind of building its own universe. I love the design of the Phantom himself with this like weird silvery mask with like a beak nose on it. I'm trying to remember the actor's name that plays the Phantom. I'm just got IMDb here. William Finley, who I love. I don't remember his name, but I love him in everything I've seen him in. Anything from like Eaten Alive to like Phantom of the Paradise, Sisters, you name it. But even more importantly than that, you know, you got Beef, played by one of my favorite character actors of all time, Garrett Graham. I love Garrett Graham from TerraVision, Used Cars, which may be on this list. Chud 2, Bud the Chud. Anytime, Child's Play 2. Anytime Garrett Graham shows up on screen, you sold me on the movie. I love it. And so, now that I think about it, I think there's three movies in the top 100 here, folks, that will have Garrett Graham in it. Just wait and see. But also, Jessica Harper is in this movie too, from Suspiria, and also Shock Treatment, which is the unofficial sequel to, well, it's technically the sequel to Rocky Horror Picture Show, and all of her films that she's done have a cult status for me as well, and I love all of those movies, and she's got an interesting voice, a singing voice as well that I really like as well. I love the song she sings in this movie and in Shock Treatment. I think she does an outstanding job. But this movie is great. If you've never seen it, check it out. It's bizarre, it's strange, and it's such a satire on the music world. But it's such an interesting 70s rendition on acid of the old Faust story. So great. Check it out if you've never seen it before. Now, also, another guy, a director I'm a big fan of is Lloyd Kaufman. I'm a big Troma fan. I love Troma. I'll admit that I can't get into all of Troma's movies. And I'm talking even about just the in-house productions, the actual Lloyd Kaufman joints. His last few films really disappointed me. It almost feels like... anyway, that's neither here nor there. But my all-time favorite Troma movie that makes the top 100 of my favorite films of all time. Nope, it's not Toxic Avenger. No, it's not The Class of Nukem High. It's not even Romeo and Juliet. All of those are close. Those are great films. But I have a super soft spot for Terra Firma. And I think you'll find this too. There's a lot of movies that are in the top 100 that are about making movies. So the idea of a movie based around Lloyd Kaufman making a movie, and then kind of throw in kind of a giallo storyline into it as well, a giallo killer in it as well, I thought was awesome. And I think this is probably one of the last really great Lloyd Kaufman films. Like it's still got a lot of the gross humor, but it doesn't take away from the story to add more gross humor that I feel like the later films have done. Later films just feels like, how soon can we get to the next fart joke or shit joke or boob joke or whatever, or blood scene. This one still feels like, I mean, as much as a slasher can, still has like a story that it follows, and the jokes are there to service the story, and not the story to service the jokes. So, Terra Firma, love it. Next one I'm going to talk about is from the year is actually a newer film from 2005, and it's another documentary. You'll find that I'm a fan of documentaries quite a bit, especially documentaries about people in the entertainment business. And this is based on. This is a documentary based on a singer that I really, really like. But really off of the cuff, I guess you could say. It was something really bizarre. Here's another thing about me. Huge Dr. Demento fan. Grew up listening to Dr. Demento. It's no secret that I am a ginormous Weird Al fan. Weird Al, first hearing Weird Al turned me on to Dr. Demento, and Dr. Demento opened a whole world to comedy and novelty music. And not just that, but bizarre music as well. Stuff that definitely non-traditional stuff. My search for music that I enjoy surpassed just the pure comedy and novelty. And this is a guy that this documentary is on a guy that kind of falls into both categories of just, because he's not really a novelty artist, but he is really tied into Dr. Demento and Weird Al, and like in Barnes and Barnes especially. And I'll just get to it. The movie's called Derailed, Inside the Mind of Larry Wildman Fisher. Wildman Fisher was a street performer. He started off as just a street performer in the 60s when Frank Zappa discovered him on the street and recorded a 2-album record with him called An Evening with Wildman Fisher. And that album is awesome. And it's all like just this guy, you would think he's just like writing music off the cuff, just off the top of his mind, but there's just something more craft to it than that. If anybody's familiar with like Wesley Willis, it's kind of along those lines. I mean, Wildman Fisher is a schizophrenic, and when he's in his like artistic mind, when he's like what they call the pep, when he has the pep, he's like this creative genius. But his, like, again, weird vocal styles, not something you expect to see. His voice gets crackling and scratchy, and he screams a lot in his music. His idea of playing his guitar is flipping it around and beating the back of it like a drum. A lot of the additional accompaniment music is just him making noises. But I love his music. There's something about it that I can't describe on why I like this style of music, but I really do. And he went on to, like, after the album he did with Zappa, then he had a falling out with Zappa because, let's face it, he's schizophrenic. And and you know, at times could be kind of dangerous. But people that let him into their lives, they love him. They love Larry for the man that he is, and the genius that he is. So then he was discovered by the founder of Rhino Records, and he was actually the very first Rhino record. What was it called? Wild Mania, I think was the name of that first album. And then after that first album, they did with Rhino. Rhino put him in contact with Barnes and Barnes, the guys who do the song Fish Heads, and Barnes and Barnes produced his next two albums, Nothing Scary, and that's the second one, and Pronounced Normal, which I have both of those albums on CD, and I listen to them constantly because you get a nice blend of the music of Barnes and Barnes with the vocal styling and song lyrics of Wildman Fisher. But that has nothing. Well, I mean, it has everything to do with this. What's great about, I'm not really talking about the movie though. What's great about this movie is tons and tons of never before seen footage of Wildman Fisher, clips from when he was on Ronan Martin's Laugh-In, some amazing pictures of him with Frank Zappa, interviews with Dr. Memento, Barnes and Barnes, his Wildman Fisher's own brother. Tons and tons of great interviews in here, all talking about this man. And then the camera following around Wildman Fisher for quite a while as well, up until when, like, after 40 years in the music business, he finally got put on medication where he ended up losing. Well, I'm spoiling the ending of this movie. Anyway, if you like very avant-garde, bizarre music, check out this documentary. It's amazing, and you'll shed a few tears by the end of the film. But that's just way too serious to be. So it's time to get into some more comedy. Another one of my all-time favorite comedies ever. I went through a phase where I watched this movie almost every single day for like a year, and that is Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks. The year being 1984. It's just a dumb TNA comedy. It just happens to have Tom Hanks in it and Tony Katane. I don't know why I love this movie, why this one connected with me, but I've always just found Hanks to be hysterical in it. It's got a lot of great funny set pieces, and I've always told my friends that I want a bachelor party just like this, including a dead donkey in the elevator. Next, something again more current. We're jumping back to all the way to 2012 with this one, and this movie is directed by the Soska sisters, and it stars Kathleen Isabella, who I love, and that is American Mary. This movie is just great. It feels rather David Lynchian at times for me, as if like the Soska sisters created this whole other world that Mary gets sucked into that is beyond reality. And what I've got a crazy connection with this movie that I can't quite put my finger on why I gravitate towards this movie, because I don't have a single tattoo. I don't have any tattoos or any body I don't even have my ears pierced. No body modification whatsoever. So I don't follow that world. I don't understand that world. That's not my world. But like, I'm sucked into this world with this movie. Everybody is just amazing in this movie. This movie's just great. I love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Anyway, if you've never seen American Mary, check it out. It's really good. So that's it for this video. We're going to wrap it up here. We come back and we'll do another part in this series of my 100 favorite films of all time. So we'll see you again really soon.